kids are in bed and I am gonna make some sourdough sandwich bread, and I thought I'd show you what I do because I get asked about this a lot. So there's obviously different kinds of sourdough. I'm gonna show you one that I make that is my dinner bread, and I love it, but it's like an artesian loaf, and so it's, you know, got that thick, like crunchy, crispy crust. And Ben has asked for years if I could just make him a, sorry if the lighting's weird, by the way, my starts, like my plants are on the other side of me and they have grow lights, and it's like a weird lighting deal. Anyway, Ben has been asking me for years if I could just make him a white sandwich bread. And I finally figured it out, and I'm so excited. So I just want to take you along on the journey. I will say that I have switched my flour to Azure Standard's like Unifine, which is it's a special milling process that only 4 mills in the US use, and one of them is Azure Standard's mill, and it preserves the oil of the grains perfectly, I guess, or something like that. It's not like steel milled and it's not normal milled. It's called Unifine. Anyway, I bought 50 pounds of it, and my breads are not turning out like they used to. They're a lot more dense. It behaves a lot more like einkorn flour in that it's soaking up a lot more moisture than I'm used to. So I'm actually gonna switch back to my favorite, or after my 50 pounds are gone, I'm gonna switch back to my favorite organic flour, which is Costco's flour. It's the one they carry is like 78 cents a pound, I think. Azure's is 82 cents a pound, so I was paying more for it because I wanted that Unifine milling process. But my breads aren't turning out, and I've started selling my bread to Ben's coworkers, and so I need bread that looks beautiful and turns out every time. So I'm actually gonna show you, I'll put a picture in here of what my sandwich bread looks like when I use regular organic flour and not the Azure Standard, like Unifine milled white flour. But anyway, I'm gonna take you along today or tonight and to show you how I make it. I will be using Azure Standard's flour, and you'll see how it turns out. It's just a little more like yellow and a little denser than the fluffy white bread that I had been making. I had perfected it. It was so good. So once I switch back to the other flour, it will turn out great again. But I'm gonna take you along and show you what I do. Real quick, for comparison's sake, I just pulled these out of our bread basket. So this is a regular like sourdough. I call it my dinner loaf. It's like an artesian bread dinner loaf. Again, this is with that Unifine, Azure Standard's Unifine flour, so it's a lot more dense. Usually my loaves are a lot puffier. Anyhow, so it's got the crisp crust, the crisp bottom, you know, like a normal sourdough loaf. What I am making right now is a sandwich loaf. So it's done in a normal, and I bake this in a cast iron Dutch oven. These loaves, sandwich loaves, are made in regular bread pans. So this is what I'm going for right now. Again, it's more dense than the ones I've been making because of the flour difference. I'm gonna probably keep saying that, but now you know, but this is what it turns out like. It still looks like sandwich bread. It's just a lot more dense, and the consistency is a lot grainier. Ben says, yeah, it's just a lot grainier, and I'm not stoked about it. It's not super fluffy like I am used to. So that is what I'm making. I wanted to show you, I have switched from having one giant like 3-inch notebook for my recipes to 3 1-inch binders, and I love it because it's just so much more accessible. So this is my breakfast breads and sourdough one. And I have a whole section for all the sourdough things I make. I make them all on a pretty like consistent rotation. I make my regular sourdough bread, like my dinner bread, sourdough zucchini bread, English muffins, sourdough waffles, sourdough tortillas, sourdough bagels, sourdough dinner rolls, sourdough pumpkin bread, and then my sourdough sandwich bread. So those are kind of the sourdough recipes that I'm trying to make all of our bread products, and that pretty much covers all of our bread products. So here we go with the sourdough sandwich bread. One thing with sourdough is that most of the recipes are going to be in weight. So you do need a kitchen scale. This kitchen scale is just a digital one. I got it for like $8 on Amazon. So it's not a huge investment, but I just put my KitchenAid mixer bowl right on top of it. And then this button right here says Z/T, and then under it says on off. So it's the on off button, but it's also the Z/T means 0/tear. So you can zero out whatever is on here. And then just keep adding, I don't know how to explain this, but then you can just keep adding stuff into it, and it will like calculate, so you don't have to do math to calculate your your grams. So anyway, I'm gonna press so like this bowl, for example, weighs 1,031 grams. When I press the Z/T button, my scale resets to 0. So now when I'm putting my flour in here, I know that I'm not having to do any math to account for the weight of the bowl. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm gonna be making a double loaf. I'm gonna make 2 loaves of sandwich bread. So I need 1,000 grams of flour, and I am scooping my flour straight out of a 5-gallon bucket. As you can see, I love this scoop. I paid $6 for it at a what am I trying to say? Antique store. Ben thinks I'm crazy, but it's a 2-cup scoop. It's old, and like obviously it's vintage, or an antique or whatever. And I just love having it. Whoa, my camera's tipping. I just love having it right in my bucket because I can just use it as a scoop. Okay, so here we are. 1,000 grams of flour. And then, oh, and I forgot to do this, but usually I start the water warming on the stove. I don't have a microwave, so and this recipe needs warm water. Usually I start it warming on the stove before I do this, but I'll just do it in a second. Okay, 1,000 grams of flour, 120, okay, so now I'm gonna press the 0 button again. It will 0 out my scale for me again, maybe. There we go. And now when I add my butter, it's starting over. So 120 grams of butter, softened butter. When I make my loaves dairy-free, which I do if I am making them for our family, I use Palm Shortening. You can get organic Palm Shortening through Amazon. I like the Grain Brain brand, or you can get it through Azure Standard. And it's just a great butter replacement. You can also use coconut oil 1-to-1. I've never used coconut oil in sourdough bread though, so I have no idea how that would turn out. My daughter's singing herself to sleep. Oh man, I hope I have 120 here. I don't know if I do. I'm not gonna make it, darn it. Okay, got to go get a little more butter from the fridge. I fixed the butter and then I took a quick break because I want to get this water warming up on the stove. So I zeroed out my pot and I need, okay, 540 grams of water. So that's usually about 3.5 to 4 cups. So I'll get this warming up on the stove. Whoops, that was too much. 540. Okay, let's get this warming up. Okay, and then meanwhile, I need 24 grams of sugar. So again, I zeroed it out, and I'll just add this till it goes to 24. Grams of sugar, and then I can just zero it again. And I need 18 grams of salt. I'm using Himalayan salt. I don't think it much matters. There we go. Now I'm going to take this over to the mixer and mix it all together. Okay. So I start with my, not the dough hook, the other one, paddle. Let that mix. And then meanwhile, I need 100 grams of fed starter. So this is what I keep my starter in. As you can see, maybe you can see, it's super bubbly and it smells really fruity. That is what you want. You want like a bubbly, fruity, active, yummy smelling starter. I fed it this morning, so I gave it a cup of flour and a cup of water this morning. and let it sit for, I always try to let it sit for at least 4 hours. A lot of times I'll let it sit overnight. If I'm gonna make bread in the morning, I will feed it before I go to bed and then let it sit overnight. But since I make the sandwich loaves in the evenings, that's always how I do it. I feed my starter in the morning. So I need 100 grams of starter. Wish I had some like music to play. Oh, that's a little more than 100 grams, but I will put a little bit back. I don't mind if it goes just a little over because it's just gonna help my bread rise a little more. So I've got 100 grams of starter. I'm gonna put my water and my starter in the dough. Okay, I'm gonna add my water, which is warm, and my starter. And then I'm gonna mix this all together, and once it's all mixed, I'm gonna let it sit for 30 minutes and rest. And that just helps the gluten, I don't know, do its thing, you know? They always tell you, you know, bread needs to rest. So I just follow the instructions. We'll get it mixed. Okay, here's what it looks like. So I just take the beater off and get all the sticky stuff out of it, and then I am going to dough off of it. See, this flour is just so, it soaks up so much water and it becomes really sticky. Anyway, it's not, my dough is not usually this sticky. And then I'm just gonna cover it with a damp towel and let it rest for 30 minutes. Okay, after the 30 minutes is up, I am going to switch to the dough hook and knead it for 8 minutes. Okay, so after the 8 minutes is up, it'll ball up like this. Yours will probably ball up more than mine because I have this weird flour, like I said, but it's good enough. So next, I just drizzled a little olive oil in this bowl because you want it to be a little bit greased. And you're going to leave it in this bowl overnight. So this is a 2-day process, as most sourdough is, because the dough needs time to ferment. So I'm just gonna dump it into a greased bowl, and then I'm gonna let it sit overnight, and then tomorrow morning I will cut this into 2 loaves, put it in loaf pans, and let it rise for, it actually has to rise like all day because my house is so cold, but in your house it might only take 2 hours for it to rise or so. Okay, and then I'm gonna cover it in plastic wrap, and I just let it sit in the warmest spot in my house overnight, which is right here. And I actually like to put a towel under it because the counters get cold, and this helps keep it a little bit warmer. It rises a little bit better. And that is all I have to do for tonight. I do also like to prep my loaf pans and put my dough cutter thing out. That way in the morning I can just do it really quickly and everything's ready to go. So I just put a little olive oil in each loaf pan, and then they're ready to go when I need them in the morning. Good morning. The kids are playing in their room, and I just woke up, and I am going to get this bread put into a loaf pan. So I'll show you what I do here. So it is it's been covered all night, and all we're gonna do, I don't even flour my counter, though you can, but it should slide out of the bowl pretty easily because your bowl was oiled. And then we're just gonna divide it into 2. And then I shape each loaf kind of on the counter, so I'm just rolling it onto itself
And then I get kind of a loaf shape that I like, say like that. And then I always tuck the ends under so that you end up with more of a rectangle, because otherwise you end up with like long skinny ends, and nobody likes long skinny ends, right? And then we talked about how these 2 oiled pans. And I'm just gonna take my scraper, so you can just, pick it up too. Put it in there. Here's 1, and here's 2. And you can make this loaf, or this recipe, single loaves as well. You do not need to make 2 loaves, but I figure if I'm making 1, I might as well make 2, right? They freeze up super well, so I will put 1 of these in my freezer after it cools. There's that. Oh, and I need to just do this real quick here. Beautiful. And then I'm going to cover these both with plastic wrap, not tightly. I'm just covering the bread itself so that it doesn't dry out, but I want it to be able to rise. So I just shove it down in there like that. See how it's not on the actual pan, it's shoved down in. And I'll do it to the other one, and then I'll leave these sit. The recipe says 2 hours. Mine have to sit all day. So I don't know if it's because I have a cold house or what. Probably because my house is cold. If you have a warmer house, they'll probably rise in 2 hours, but mine will be left all day, and then I'll bake them off tonight. I forgot to tell you, I do like to lightly oil the plastic wrap, because otherwise it'll stick to the bread, and then you like peel off the top layer of your bread and it really stinks. So anyway, I just like rub my plastic wrap in a little bit of olive oil before I stick it on my breads, and then it won't stick. Okay, it is 8 p.m. on day 2, and I'm about to stick them in the oven. I'll show you what they look like right now. So you want them to rise about 1 inch above the pan in the middle. And I'm actually gonna take them over to the oven. And I like to just give them a last little boost of rising by letting them rise on the oven as it's preheating. So I just stick them on here. Now I did start my oven, or I did preheat my oven to 500, because if you preheat it to 500, your loaves will get a little bit more of what they call an oven spring. So they'll pop up a little bit more upon sticking them in. I will decrease the temperature to 375 as soon as I pop them in. So I just preheat it to 500, stick them in there once it's preheated, and then decrease to 375. And I bake them for 38 minutes. The recipe says 40 to 45, but my oven, and I think with the 500 thing, 38 is pretty much perfect. You've seen me in so many different forms in this video. I am headed to bed, but I wanted to show you. I pulled them out of the oven. I did overproof them a little bit. You can overproof them, which means I let them rise a little bit too long. Like I told you, they're supposed to rise in their pans for about 2 hours before you bake them. But our house is really cold and drafty, and so I usually let them sit and try to rise all day. But I left them sitting for like 12 hours, and it was about 2 hours too long, so they started to deflate, which is very unfortunate. But they still turned out pretty, and I will show you what they turned out like. I will say, when you pull them out of the oven, the crust feels hard. Don't fret. Just leave them for a bit, pop them out of their pans, and let them cool all the way down before you eat them, before you cut into them. But the crust will soften, so it's not hard like it doesn't end up hard like it feels when it comes out of the oven. And these freeze really well, so let them cool all the way overnight. I'll just throw a kitchen towel over them, and they'll freeze great. Okay, hopefully that was helpful for you. I know it probably felt like a super long process, but honestly, there's not a lot of babysitting involved. You just make the dough one night and then let it rise all day the next day and then bake it off. So I don't feel like it actually takes that long. As far as like the time I have to put into it, it's a lot of just letting the dough sit around. Enjoy making your
own loaves, and I'll put the recipe down in the description so that you can, tripped, have it too. Good night.